I've never been the kind of man who goes online to vent. I always handled things quietly, privately, the way my father taught me. If you talk too much about a problem, you start believing you can't solve it. But the night everything shifted, when my boss laughed in my face like my dignity was some cheap office joke, I realized silence wasn't strength anymore. It was suffocation. And the worst part, I didn't even understand what I had stumbled into that first day. All I knew was that something in his voice didn't sound like authority. It sounded like someone who believed no one could touch him. I'd been at the company 3 years, middle of the pack, nothing flashy, consistent, reliable. Exactly the type of employee a bad manager thinks he owns. My boss, Cole, thrived on that dynamic. He had this habit of turning normal instructions into public performances, making sure the whole department heard how simple his task was and how hard it seemed for people like me to keep up. If someone asked a question, he smirked first, answered second. If someone made a mistake, he remembered it for months. He'd clap you on the back, just hard enough to sting, and call it camaraderie. It wasn't a nightmare job, it was just slowly corrosive. The kind of place where you didn't realize you were grinding your teeth until someone pointed it out. And for a long time, I thought maybe that was just office life. Maybe everyone had a Cole. But the shift started on a Tuesday. Quiet, forgettable, the sort of day you walk into half awake, thinking only about coffee and the pile of emails waiting for you. I stayed late finishing a report because Cole had moved the deadline without mentioning it to anyone except himself. By 9, the office was near silent, except for the air conditioner rattling like loose change. I went to drop off a printed copy on his desk because he hated emails after hours. Shows laziness, he claimed. His office door was cracked open just enough for me to see the light from his monitor. Normally, he left by 6. Dinner with his wife, some fitness class. I never kept track. But that night, he was there, hunched over his screen, totally focused. Not his usual swagger, not the relaxed posture he used during the day. He looked alert, intent, like someone working on something he didn't want an audience for. I knocked lightly. Nothing. I pushed the door a little more. "Cole," I said quietly. He jumped, not dramatically, just a tight shoulder flinch you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. His hand immediately covered part of the screen, and he minimized whatever he was viewing. "Jesus, Grant," he muttered. "You need to announce yourself." "I knocked," I said. "You didn't answer." I forced a smile, the kind he plastered on during team meetings. "Burning the midnight oil?" he asked, tapping a pen like he was trying to create a rhythm he could hide behind. "I finished the report," I said, placing it on his desk. "Hard copy, like you wanted." He nodded, but his eyes flicked. Not at me, but toward the corner of the screen he hadn't fully minimized. Numbers, columns, something with a header I didn't catch, but it wasn't our department's format, not even close. "Looks like you're working late too," I said casually. He stiffened. "Just reviewing some things." His tone was flat, tight. No sarcasm, no dominance, just strain. I didn't push. I left the office, closed the door, walked down the hallway, but the image stayed in my head. His hand flying to cover the screen, the shift in his voice, the way he didn't mock me once. Cole never missed a chance to establish the pecking order. But there, in that empty building, he didn't treat me like an employee. He treated me like a threat. The next morning he was back to normal, loud, loose, leaning against my cubicle to point out a typo in an email I'd sent. The guy loved an audience. "Double-checking isn't illegal yet, Grant," he said, shaking his head dramatically so the whole row could hear. Before, I would have brushed it off. But now I watched him. I watched how he avoided discussing anything that required specifics, how he kept his office door half closed, not fully shut, not fully open, how he guarded his monitor with his body whenever someone came in. Little things you wouldn't notice unless you were looking. And I was looking. 2 days later, he called me into his office, claiming he needed my help reorganizing shared folders. "You're good with structure," he said, pretending it was a compliment. But when I sat down at his computer, he kept leaning over me, close enough that I could feel his breath every time he pretended to explain a folder path. It was the first time I realized he wasn't worried I'd miss something. He was worried I'd see something. I didn't understand what yet, but his behavior changed, and so did the air around the office, like something invisible was moving under the floorboards, waiting for the wrong footstep. That week I stayed later again, not because of deadlines, but because I wanted to see if he would. He did. And when he left his office for a phone call and forgot to lock his screen, I passed by the doorway and saw a flash of a document title that didn't belong to our department. Something about reimbursements, something about approvals. I didn't take a picture. I didn't touch a thing. I just froze, memorized what I could, and kept walking like nothing happened. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't tired of work. I was alert, curious, suspicious. Something was wrong, and my boss knew I had seen enough to notice it. He just didn't know how much I understood. Not yet. The thing about suspicion is that once it's awake, it doesn't go back to sleep. You start noticing tiny cracks that were always there, like realizing a picture on your wall has been crooked for years, and now you can't unsee it. The first real crack appeared on payday. I was going through my online statement during lunch, half distracted when I saw it. A line item from HR labeled Adjustment Expense Discrepancy. The number wasn't huge, but it was enough to hurt. I hadn't filed any questionable expenses that month. I barely used my company card at all. I printed the page and walked down to HR. Sandra, our HR rep, looked at her screen, then at me. "Yeah, Grant, it's a standard correction," she said. "Cole flagged one of your reimbursements as non-compliant. It threw off your monthly totals." I frowned. "What reimbursement?" She clicked around. "Client dinner. 2 weeks ago. You tried to write off drinks and policy's 1 alcoholic beverage per person." "I don't drink," I said. "At all." She paused. "That's what the form says? Can I see it?" She hesitated, then turned the monitor slightly. There it was. My name, my employee ID, the restaurant I'd taken a client to. Except the total was higher. Extra line items, 2 extra cocktails and a dessert we definitely hadn't ordered. "Who edited this?" I asked. "Managers can make corrections before final submission," she said. "It looks like Cole handled it." Something cold slid down my spine. So he changes it, and I get the correction? She pursed her lips like she regretted saying anything. "Grant, if you have an issue with a manager's review, you should take it up with him first. You know the chain of command." Yeah, I knew the chain of command. It was the same one wrapped tightly around everyone's neck. On my way back upstairs, I stopped by the shared printer room. One of the printers was spitting out a stack of spreadsheets with the same header I'd seen on Cole's screen. Reimbursements, approvals, employee IDs. Half out of habit, half out of anger, I picked up the top page to see whose it was. It was mine. Except it wasn't. The numbers were bloated, smudged with edits. Several expenses I recognized, a few I didn't. And down at the bottom, in a different font, was a comment. "Pattern of oversubmission. Keep an eye on Q3 bonus eligibility." I stared at that line until the letters blurred. "Those are confidential," a voice said behind me. I turned. Cole stood in the doorway, tie loosened, that familiar, lazy grin on his face. He plucked the paper from my hand with 2 fingers. "Bit nosy, aren't we?" he said. "That's my name on it," I replied, forcing my voice to stay flat. "And you added things I never spent." He glanced at the sheet, barely pretending to care. "It's called rounding up. The system doesn't like messy numbers. You'll live." HR docked my paycheck. He shrugged. "Then maybe don't put me in a position where I have to correct your reports." I clenched my jaw. "You're correcting them by making me look like I'm abusing the card." He leaned closer, eyes amused. "Grant, there are people in this building who would kill to have your problems. You have a job, you get paid, you go home. Don't complicate it." "That's not an answer," I said. "It's the only one you're getting. he shot back. He crumpled the printed page in one hand and tossed it into the bin like it was scrap. Next time you're curious about something, come ask me. Don't go snooping around financial reports. I didn't snoop, I said. The printer handed it to me. He smirked. The printer doesn't print without a request. And you forget something, Grant. I see the logs. His tone changed on that last sentence. Less mocking, more warning. That was the moment I realized he wasn't being careless. He was being confident. Confident that the system, the hierarchy, the culture, were built in a way that would always side with him. That was just the beginning. An hour later, I was called into a quick check-in in his office. No warning, no agenda. He closed the door behind me and gestured at the chair across from his desk. So, he said, spinning his pen, you went to HR about your adjustment. He said the word like it weighed nothing. I asked what it was, I replied. I didn't realize asking about my own pay needed clearance. He smiled without his eyes. You know how this works, Grant. You bring something to me, I handle it. You bypass me. It looks like you think I'm the problem. I went to HR because the adjustment came from HR, I said. Then I find out you changed my reimbursement and left a note saying I have a pattern. He tilted his head. Do you? No, he shrugged. Then you have nothing to worry about. That's not how that works, I said. You're building a paper trail that says I'm irresponsible with company money. That affects my bonus, maybe my job. For someone who doesn't drink, he said slowly, you're very dramatic. I stared at him. Fix it, he laughed then. Not a nervous laugh, not a surprised one. A full, entertained chuckle, like I just told him I planned to move the building 2 feet to the left with my bare hands. Grant, he said, leaning back, do you have any idea how many people sit in that chair and ask me to fix things, schedules, reviews, performance issues, pay? Everyone thinks their story is special. He tapped the pen on the desk with each word. Yours isn't? It's not a story, I said quietly. It's my life. He waved a hand. Your life is fine. You come in, you do average work. You stay out of trouble. As long as I sign off, you're safe. You start making noise. You stop being my problem and start being the company's problem. And the company doesn't have feelings. So that's the deal, I said. You twist the numbers and I keep my head down. He laughed again, softer. Grow up. You think I don't know every person here pads something? Time, mileage, sick days. I'm not the villain you want me to be. You're editing my reports and punishing me for things I didn't do, I said. That's not a padding. That's lying. He stopped tapping the pen. The room went quiet enough that I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Then he smiled slowly, like he'd arrived at the part of the conversation he'd been waiting for. Okay, he said. Let's say I am. Let's say I'm lying, cooking the books, moving numbers, whatever little movie you're playing in your head. What exactly are you going to do about it, Grant? He stared straight at me, eyes bright. Quit? He raised his eyebrows. That's your big move? Walk out, leave your paycheck, your benefits, because you're upset with the guy who signs your reviews? My integrity is worth more than your integrity, he interrupted, his voice suddenly louder, is a line on a performance form I can edit in 20 seconds. He shook his head, smiling again. Come on, man, be serious. You want to stand on principle? Great. Do it on your own time. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. You're not going to quit. You're going to cool off. You're going to come back tomorrow, and you're going to do your job. Because that's what you do. You're steady, predictable, safe. Then he said it, slow, like a punchline he'd been rehearsing. My boss laughed. What will you do, quit? He let the words hang in the air, enjoying them. For a second I imagined what he saw. A mid-level employee in a cheap shirt, mortgage, bills, no safety net. A man fully tethered to his paycheck. He thought he knew exactly how the rest of this conversation would go. Me backing down. Me apologizing for overreacting. Me leaving with my head buzzing and my hands empty. But something flicked over inside me, clean and sharp. I felt the anger, sure, but underneath it, there was something steadier. Not rage. Clarity. I stood up. "You're right," I said. He looked almost disappointed at how fast I gave in. "See? There we go. Take the night, have a beer, forget this." "You're right," I repeated, ignoring that. "I'm not going to quit." He smirked. "Thought so." I met his eyes. "I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to keep doing my job exactly the way it's supposed to be done. And I'm going to watch everything you sign like a hawk." The smirk twitched. "Careful, Grant," he said. "That sounds like insubordination." "No," I said calmly. "It sounds like accuracy." He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Are we done?" he asked finally. "For now," I said. As I reached for the door, he called after me. "You start digging where you don't belong, you're going to find out how replaceable you are." I didn't turn around. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'll find out how replaceable you're not." There was a silence so thick I could almost feel it on my skin. That night, I didn't go home and vent to anyone. I didn't rage text friends or look up job listings. I sat at my kitchen table with a blank notebook and wrote down everything I could remember. Dates, comments, that falsified expense, the printer incident, his exact words. I realized I'd been saving a man who never wanted saving. The next morning, I walked into the office with the same key card, the same coffee, the same quiet routine. But something was different. I stopped being the guy who swallowed everything and started being the guy who noticed. And Cole had no idea he'd just given me the first piece I needed. I didn't wake up the next day planning revenge. I woke up planning accuracy. I wasn't hunting Cole. I was documenting him. That's what made the shift so quiet, so dangerous. You don't realize how loud someone's power is until you stop reacting to it. I showed up early before most of the office lights flicked on and pulled every shared folder he had touched in the last 3 months. Half of it was normal. Half of it wasn't. Numbers that didn't match receipts. Adjustments that had no notes. Approvals that happened on days he wasn't even in the building. Little fingerprints he didn't expect anyone to check. I didn't print anything. I didn't move anything. I just wrote down what I saw. Date. Time. File name. Summary. It felt surgical. By noon, Cole felt it. He passed my desk twice, each time slowing like he meant to say something but couldn't find the right line. On the third pass, he put a hand on the top of my cubicle. "Everything good?" he asked, voice too casual. I kept typing. "Fine." He waited like I was supposed to fill the silence with submission. When I didn't, he said, "You look busy." "There's a lot to review," I replied. He squinted at me, then smiled tightly. "Make sure you're reviewing the right things." "I am." His jaw worked once, then he walked away. That's when the pressure started. Not loud, not obvious. Little pushes designed to break someone who cared about keeping the peace. He reassigned tasks without telling me. He forgot to copy me on team emails. He added me last minute to meetings meant to waste my day. He even moved my deadline on a major project up by 3 days, sending me a message at 6:14 p.m. that said, "Need this sooner. You'll manage." I didn't respond. I just adjusted the plan and kept writing things down. But the real shift happened the day I found the folder. It wasn't hidden. Not technically. It was buried 3 layers deep in an archive no one touched anymore, a place you'd only find if you were looking for it. A folder labeled with a string of numbers instead of a name. At first I thought it was a system dump, then I opened it. Inside were PDFs, signed approvals, vendor payments, reimbursement logs. Only the vendors didn't exist in our directory, and the payments weren't small. Not outrageous, but steady. Predictable. Consultation fees, market analysis, special services. All funneled through Cole's authorization, and then I saw something that stopped my breath cold. Some of the charges were assigned to employees. Their department codes, their names. Expenses they had never submitted were being routed through them, then corrected, then balanced in a way that made the books look clean. It wasn't sloppy. It was a pattern. And in the middle of it, like a thread pulling everything together, was Cole's digital signature. I took notes until my wrist hurt. At 5:42 that evening, as the office thinned out, I stood to stretch. And through the glass wall of his office, I saw him watching me. Not casually, not in passing. He was sitting in his chair, hands clasped together, staring like he was trying to see inside my skull. When he noticed I'd seen him, he smiled. Slow. Thin. I sat back down and kept working. 2 days later, he made his first real move. I was called into a meeting with him and a woman from HR I barely recognized. Cole closed the door behind us. "We've received concerns," he began, clasping his hands like he was starting a sermon. The HR rep folded her arms. "There have been reports that your performance has become inconsistent," she said, "specifically your communication with your manager." I almost laughed. "Reports from who?" Cole sighed like he was disappointed in me. "Grant, look, we're just checking in. You've been tense lately." "Tense?" I repeated. "Or observant?" He tilted his head. "See? That tone. That's not the Grant I know." "Maybe you don't know me," I said. The HR rep leaned forward. "He's concerned you're overextending yourself, staying late, accessing files outside your immediate scope." There it was, the first trap. "I'm reviewing shared materials," I said calmly. "Everything I've opened is accessible to the entire department. But the timing," she pressed. "After hours, activity can raise questions." "Then answer one for me," I said, turning to Cole. "Why are you here after hours?" His eyes flashed. For a moment the mask slipped. Then he forced a chuckle. "See what I mean?" he told HR. "This kind of attitude." "I can show you exactly what files I accessed," I said, cutting him off. "All clean, all logged, and you know it." HR shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't expecting pushback. "Look, this isn't disciplinary," she said. "Just a temperature check." "Then take my temperature," I said. "I'm fine." When the meeting ended, Cole lingered. He waited until HR left, then closed the door halfway. "You think you're brave," he said quietly. "You're not. You're reckless." "I think you're cornered," I replied. He stepped closer. "You don't know the game you're playing. And you don't know how patient I can be." His face tightened. "Be careful, Grant." "I am." The next week was chaos in slow motion. Cole started making mistakes. Small ones, but obvious if you were looking. He approved things twice, mixed up files, snapped at the accounting team. He was unraveling, and no one saw it except me. One night, after everyone had left, I walked past his office and heard him on the phone. Not angry, not authoritative. Panicked. "I told you I'm handling it," he whispered harshly. "No, he doesn't have anything. He's just... No, listen, he's nothing. I'm telling you, he's nothing." He paused. Yes, I know what happens if this gets looked at. I know exactly what happens." He hung up, breathing hard. He looked like a man trying to hold water in his fists. The next morning, he called me to his office. I stepped inside. He closed the door. No smile, no performance. "You're done digging," he said. "I haven't dug anything," I replied. "I've observed." "You're done," he repeated. His voice shook, not with anger, but with fear he didn't know how to hide. "Because if you keep going, you're going to break things you don't know how to fix." "And if I stop?" I asked. He swallowed. "Then this stays simple." "Simple for who?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. When I walked out of that office, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. He wasn't scared of losing his job. He was scared of losing something far bigger. That night, I sat at my table, the same table where I'd written the first note weeks earlier, and I realized exactly what I had become. Not his subordinate, not his problem. I was the person he didn't see coming, working quietly while he swung at shadows. And they thought I was gone. I wasn't. It didn't happen in a burst. No dramatic confrontation. No shouting match in the hallway. The ending came the way storms end. Quiet, steady, inevitable once all the pressure has built in the right places. I spent the next week doing one thing better than anyone expected of me: my actual job. I hit every deadline, documented every step, and left a trail so clean a lawyer could walk it barefoot. Meanwhile, Cole was unraveling at the edges. The more normal I acted, the harder he tried to manufacture problems. He copied HR on emails that didn't need HR. He accused me of missing tasks I'd already completed. He hovered behind my chair like he expected me to delete a confession from his desktop. But I didn't need him to confess. I just needed the truth to sit somewhere it couldn't be buried. I'd already gathered enough to see the pattern: the false vendors, the siphoned reimbursements, the fabricated corrections pinned onto employees who never noticed the deductions. But gathering wasn't enough. I had to place it exactly where it belonged. The company had a compliance portal for anonymous reporting, but I didn't use it. Too easy to intercept. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with someone I'd spoken to only twice, a senior manager in the regional office named Adler. The kind of man people described as cold, which usually meant he doesn't waste time. I sent a short note, requesting confidential conversation regarding irregular financial activity. No details, no accusations. The reply came 8 minutes later. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., conference room 4. That night, I slept like a man who'd already walked through the fire. I arrived early. Adler didn't shake hands or make small talk. He sat across from me, clicked a pen, and said, "Tell me exactly what you've observed." So I did. No embellishments, no guesses, just facts. Dates, file names, screens I'd seen, documents altered, expense reports rerouted, patterns consistent with internal misappropriation. When I finished, Adler exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding the breath since my first sentence. "Do you have any of the files?" he asked. "I have nothing downloaded," I said. "I didn't move or save anything, but I can show you where to find every piece." He nodded once. "Good." We walked to a secured workstation where he pulled up the system logs. I guided him, not touching the keyboard once. He clicked through folder after folder, reading silently while his expression never changed. When he reached the archive with the falsified vendor files, he stared at the screen for several seconds. "This is enough," he said finally. "Enough for what?" I asked. "For an internal investigation. It starts today." He closed the browser, locked the station, and stood. "You'll hear from legal. Do not mention this meeting to anyone." "I won't." "And Grant?" He paused. "You did the right thing by coming directly to me." There was no praise in his voice, just recognition. Exactly what I needed. When I returned to my floor, Cole was waiting by my desk. "Where were you?" he asked, too casual. "Team meeting started 20 minutes ago." "I was pulled into another meeting," I said. "With who?" "Someone who actually needed to see me." His pupils tightened. "What does that mean?" "It means nothing you need to worry about," I replied, typing my password. "Not yet." He opened his mouth, but the phone at reception started ringing over and over. 3 short rings, the pattern used only for internal summoning. A moment later, Sandra from HR appeared in the doorway of the department. "Cole," she called. "They need you upstairs." His head snapped toward her. "Who?" "Legal," she said, "right now." The room shifted, not in noise, but in attention. His posture stiffened. He adjusted his tie. Then he looked back at me. The smile was gone. "You did something," he said quietly. "I did my job," I replied. He stared at me for a long second, hatred and fear battling in the whites of his eyes. Then he walked out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't bark orders. He just left, shoulders tight, steps too quick to be confident. He never returned. By the next morning, his office was locked. By noon, a memo went out stating that, effective immediately, Cole Harrison is no longer employed with the company, and that a transition manager will be appointed shortly. No reason, no details. But people didn't need details. They'd felt something wrong for a long time. Now they saw the shape of it. Sandra stopped by my desk in the afternoon. Her voice was low, careful. "Compliance wanted me to tell you they've confirmed irregularities. You were right to bring it forward." Is the investigation finished? I asked. It's ongoing, but she hesitated. Internal fraud of that scale? He won't be back. She didn't need to say more. The quiet in the office said enough. Not relief, not celebration. Just the settling of something that had been unbalanced for years. In the days that followed, small details trickled out. Not gossip, facts. Cole had authorized reimbursement streams that didn't exist. He'd funneled payments through dead vendor names. He'd used employee IDs to mask extra charges. Nothing massive at once, just steady draining, the kind that hides in plain sight. The part that stayed with me was how easy it had been for him to twist numbers, because no one ever checked the man who checked everything. 2 weeks later, Adler called me back in. He stood, shook my hand. First time he'd touched me, then told me the regional office was restructuring. We need someone reliable overseeing departmental audits, he said. Someone thorough. He slid a paper toward me. A promotion, a pay raise, a role that meant I wouldn't answer to anyone like Cole ever again. I signed. The office felt different after that, not brighter, just honest. People looked me in the eye more. Someone left a coffee on my desk with a note that said, "Thank you for saying what we couldn't." I didn't know who wrote it, and I didn't need to. It wasn't admiration, it was relief. The first weekend after everything settled, I cleaned my apartment, not because it needed it, because my head finally did. I dumped old receipts, reorganized drawers, stood in the doorway of my living room, and breathed in a silence that didn't feel heavy anymore. I hadn't destroyed him. I hadn't gone to war. I hadn't raised my voice or played his game. I just told the truth to the right person. One afternoon, a co-worker from another department stopped me outside the elevator. "I heard about what happened," he said. "You must feel vindicated." I thought about that, about Cole laughing at me, about him asking what I would do, about the way he underestimated the one thing he never understood, quiet persistence. "Vindicated?" I said. "No, I just feel done." And that was the truth. No victory dance, no celebration, just calm. The kind you don't appreciate until you go months without it. The kind that feels like your lungs finally learned how to work again. The following Monday, I walked into the building with a badge that carried more weight and a mind that carried less. I passed Cole's old office, empty now, blinds open, desk cleared, except for a single scuff mark on the floor where his chair used to sit. It looked small, smaller than I remembered. I didn't stop walking, didn't look twice, because there was nothing left to look at. He laughed at me once, asked what I could possibly do. I did it, and I never had to raise my voice. By the time I reached my new office and set my coffee on the desk, the last of the weight finally slipped off my shoulders. The job was quiet, the room was steady, and my life fit exactly the way it was supposed to.